I'm not here to convince you, just to share the truth, beneath the thin veneer of our digital achievements and intellectual pride. We are still tethered to the primordial, thumping reality of our biology. And the more we try to ignore it, the more it consumes us. David Salay's Flesh is a brutal, forensic examination of the human animal trapped in the neon-lit maze of modern London, a city that functions as a vast, indifferent laboratory for the study of physical hunger and spiritual starvation. The narrative is not a sequence of events but a series of visceral collisions, raw, unvarnished encounters where the body speaks the truths the mind is too terrified to admit. We are introduced to the archetype of the sated predator. Men who have conquered the material world only to find that their success has left them more hollow than when they began. They move through the grey, rain-slicked streets with a sense of entitlement that masks a profound, existential dread. These are not heroes, they are organisms driven by the ancient, rhythmic pulse of the flesh, seeking a connection that they are biologically incapable of sustaining. The story opens with the character of the aging professional, a man who has traded his youth for a high-rise office and a bank account that commands respect. Yet, in the quiet moments between meetings, he is haunted by the undeniable decay of his own vessel. He looks at his reflection and sees the shadow of the beast, the sagging skin, the labored breath, the slowing of the blood. His pursuit of younger women is not a romantic endeavor but a desperate, alchemical ritual. He believes that by making contact with youthful flesh, he can somehow absorb its vitality, cheating the entropy that is claiming him cell by cell. The analysis of this archetype reveals the first great lesson of the book. The flesh is an unforgiving ledger. You can dress it in the finest silks and perfume it with the scent of success, but it remains a creature of the earth, subject to the gravitational pull of time and death. The declining master represents the psychological trap of materialism, the belief that if you can just touch enough beauty, you will never have to face the ugliness of your own end. The narrative momentum shifts to the younger generation, embodied by the drifting youth. These characters are not burdened by the loss of status, for they have not yet earned it. Instead, they are burdened by the sheer weight of their own aimless desire. They navigate London's nightlife like sharks in a dark sea, driven by a dopamine-fueled compulsion to find another body to cling to, if only for an hour. This is the archetype of the hungry ghost, a being with a bottomless stomach and a pinhole throat, perpetually seeking a satisfaction that the physical world can never fully provide. Szalay describes these encounters with a cold, clinical precision that strips away the lies of pornography and romance. There is the smell of old sweat, the awkwardness of limbs, the transactional coldness of the gaze. The analysis of these scenes reveals a profound psychological fragmentation. By reducing the other to a collection of biological parts, flesh to be consumed, the individual inevitably reduces themselves to an object as well. The pursuit of pure sensation leads not to liberation, but to a profound depersonalization. The more they touch, the less they feel. London itself becomes the indifferent mother, a landscape of concrete and glass that mirrors the emotional sterility of its inhabitants. The city is portrayed not through its monuments, but through its textures, the damp chill of a rental flat, the flickering lights of a kebab shop, the muffled sounds of traffic that underscore the silence of an empty bed. In this environment, the flesh is the only thing that feels real, yet it is also the very thing that proves our isolation. Two bodies can intertwine with maximum intensity, but they remain two separate systems of nerves and bone, unable to truly merge. This is the tragedy of the surface, the realization that the skin is not a bridge, but a wall. The narrative forces the listener to experience the claustrophobia of the material world, where every interaction is a desperate attempt to break through that wall, only to find more skin on the other side. The script then explores the archetype of the exchanged body, where desire meets the marketplace. In one story segment, the power dynamics of wealth and beauty are laid bare with uncomfortable honesty. A man pays for the presence of a woman, but what he is truly buying is the illusion that he is not alone. The flesh here is a commodity, a piece of the world that can be rented for the night. The analysis of this transaction delves into the archetype of the prostitute not merely as a profession, but as a metaphor for how we all sell pieces of our soul for the comfort of another's warmth. We see the man struggle to maintain the mask of the alpha, while beneath the surface, he is a shivering child terrified of the dark. The lesson learned is that when money enters the bedroom, truth leaves it. The transaction creates a relational void where intimacy is replaced by performance, leaving both parties more alienated than before. As the continuous narrative flows deeper into the night, it touches upon the biology of the ego. Szalay suggests that our social identities are merely fragile structures built upon a foundation of sensory needs. When a man loses his job or his status, his relationship with his own flesh changes. He becomes more aware of his vulnerability, more attuned to the fragility of his existence. The story depicts the Negredo of the modern man, the dark night of the soul where he must face himself without the armor of his career. In the absence of external validation, he turns to the body as his last refuge, only to find that the body has no loyalty to his ego. It gets tired. It gets sick. It fails him at the moment he needs it most. The psychological intensity of the script increases as it describes the anatomy of guilt, the way the body carries the weight of our moral failures, manifesting in the heavy chest, the restless eyes, and the persistent, gnawing fatigue of a life lived for the self. The archetype of the witness appears in the form of characters who watch others from a distance, projecting their own fantasies onto the flesh of strangers. This represents the voyeuristic shadow, the part of the psyche that prefers the safety of the gaze to the risk of the touch. The narrative portrays the city as a hall of mirrors where everyone is watching everyone else, yet no one is truly seen. The analysis here focuses on the death of the subject. When we look at others only as flesh, we erase their humanity, their history, and their divinity. We turn the world into a slaughterhouse of desire. Szalay's prose serves as a mirror, reflecting our own tendencies to objectify the world around us. The lesson is a call to integrated awareness, the realization that the flesh must be animated by a spirit, or it becomes nothing more than a burden. The story then transitions to the cycle of consumption, where the pursuit of the flesh mirrors the late capitalist obsession with the new. Just as we discard old phones for the latest model, the characters in flesh discard relationships as soon as the initial sensory novelty wears off. They are trapped in a hedonic treadmill, running faster and faster toward a satisfaction that remains perpetually out of reach. The narrative describes the exhaustion of this lifestyle, the hangovers that are more than just physical, the soul weariness that comes from 1,000 shallow encounters. This segment of the script analyzes the loss of the sacred. When nothing is forbidden, nothing is holy. When every body is available, no body is precious. The characters are drowning in a sea of availability, unable to find a single island of meaning to rest upon. By the end of this first part, the narrative has established the physical prison in which the characters reside. They are captives of their own nerves, slaves to a chemical reward system that they no longer understand. The psychological weight is heavy, as the listener is forced to confront the meat reality of their own life. The story doesn't offer a way out yet, it only offers a deeper look in. We see the declining master and the hungry ghost sitting in the same city, breathing the same air, both haunted by the same inescapable truth. They are made of a substance that is dying every second. The lesson is a preparation for the rubedo, the final stage of transformation that can only occur once the ego has been completely crushed by the reality of the flesh. As the script continues, the focus will move from the hungry to the broken, exploring what happens when the flesh finally fails and the soul is forced to look elsewhere for its salvation. The descent into the labyrinth of the corporeal deepens as the narrative shifts from the heat of pursuit to the cold, antiseptic reality of the biological burden. This is where the characters confront the archetype of the fragile vessel. We follow a protagonist who, having spent his life treating his body as an invincible engine of ambition, suddenly finds himself in a sterile hospital ward, surrounded by the hum of machines and the smell of industrial cleaning fluid. In this space, the flesh is no longer an instrument of pleasure or a symbol of status, it is a problem to be solved, a malfunctioning machine that demands his total, terrified attention. The analysis of this shift reveals the profound narcissistic injury that occurs when the ego realizes it is a tenant in a house that is falling apart. You are not the master of your cells, you are their passenger. And the journey is nearing its end. The story focuses on the sensory details of vulnerability, the thinness of a gown, the coldness of a stethoscope, the way the light reflects off the tiled walls. Szalay strips away the urban armor of the sated predator and leaves behind the primal victim. The narrative portrays the psychological collapse that follows the physical one. When the flesh fails, the identity built upon it vanishes like smoke. The character looks at his hands and no longer sees the hands of a surgeon, a lawyer, or a lover. He sees pitting edema, atrophied muscle, and jaundiced skin. This is the alchemical dissolution, where the solid structures of the social self are melted down by the acidic reality of illness. The lesson learned is the precarity of being, the truth that everything we love and everything we represent is held together by a fragile chemical balance that can be tipped by a single cell's rebellion. As the continuous narrative flows, we encounter the archetype of the caretaker, a figure who exists on the periphery of the flesh, touching it without desiring it. This is the nurse, the spouse, or the paid attendant who witnesses the raw human without the filter of social niceties. The story describes the intimacy of care as a dark, uncomfortable mirror to the intimacy of sex. To wash a dying body is to confront the final truth of the matter, that we are all eventually reduced to the same basic needs. The analysis here explores the degradation of the persona. In the hands of the caretaker, the hero is just a patient, the beauty is just a body to be turned, and the titan is just a child in an adult's skin. Szalay uses this to highlight the universal equality of the flesh. In the morgue of the city, there is no hierarchy, there is only the quiet, heavy stillness of the material that has finished its work. The script then pivots back to the streets, following the shadow of the commodity as it manifests in a scene of desperate, transactional intimacy. We see a woman who uses her flesh as a shield, a way to navigate a world that sees her as nothing else. She is the archetype of the objectified soul, a person who has learned to inhabit the flesh without being present in it. The narrative describes her dissociative gaze, the way she looks past the men who touch her, her mind already in another room, another life. The analysis of this state reveals the psychological fragmentation required to survive a world that treats people as meat. She has achieved her internal nihilism, where she believes that because her body is for sale, her soul must be non-existent. The lesson is a warning about the deadening of the senses when we use the flesh to escape the self. We eventually lose the ability to feel anything at all. The narrative momentum intensifies as we reach the crisis of the senses. One of the protagonists, in a fit of existential panic, attempts to feel more by pushing his body to the absolute limit. He drinks to excess. He seeks out increasingly violent or degrading encounters. He runs until his lungs burn, all in a desperate attempt to break through the numbness of the modern. This is the archetype of the self-flagellator, the one who believes that pain is the only truth left in a world of plastic and screens. The analysis of this behavior focuses on the inversion of pleasure. When the soul is starved, it begins to feed on pain as a substitute for meaning. The narrative describes the aftermath, the bruises, the hangovers, the hollow eyes, as the sacraments of the lost. We learn that the flesh has a threshold. If you push it too far in search of a peak experience, you only find the abyss of exhaustion. The story then explores the archetype of the mourner, the one who is left behind to deal with the flesh of the other after the spirit has departed. The narrative describes the process of clearing out an apartment, the lingering scent of a person on their clothes, the physical residue of a life. This is the persistence of the material. The characters realize that we leave behind a shadow of matter objects, hair in a brush, skin cells in the carpet, that mocks the fleeting nature of our thoughts and dreams. The analysis here is on the materiality of memory. We don't just remember people, we remember their weight, their heat, their fleshiness. When they are gone, the world feels thinner, less substantial. The lesson is that our connection to others is rooted in the physical, and the loss of that physical presence is a wound that the mind cannot easily close. The narrative momentum builds toward a collective sense of urban decay. The city itself is described as a rotting organism, its pipes leaking, its walls crumbling, its people aging in unison. Szalay draws a direct parallel between the flesh of the man and the flesh of the city. Both are subject to the same laws of obsolescence. The analysis of this parallel explores the myth of progress. We believe we are moving forward, but in the biological sense, We are only moving toward entropy. The script describes a scene in a crowded subway car, a mass of humanity. Skin against skin, breath against breath, where the protagonist feels a sudden, overwhelming sense of species dread. He sees the collective flesh as a single, doomed entity. A giant animal that is unaware of its own impending slaughter. This is the macro shadow. The realization that the tragedy of the individual is the tragedy of the whole. As the second part concludes, the focus returns to the stillness of the moment. A character is shown standing in the rain, feeling the water against his face. And for a brief second, he stops needing and starts being. This is the archetype of the reconciled. He accepts that he is flesh, with all its flaws, its smells, and its inevitable end. He stops fighting the gravity of his existence. The analysis suggests that the only way to transcend the flesh is to fully inhabit it, to stop treating the body as a tool or a prison and to start treating it as a holy fact. The script leaves the listener at the edge of the final realization, that we are not spirits with bodies, but living flesh that has been given the temporary, miraculous gift of awareness. The final work is not to escape the flesh, but to find the meaning in the matter before the matter returns to the earth. The final movement of Salay's autopsy of the human condition enters the rubedo, the stage of the reddening, where the ego is finally stripped of its pretenses and the soul is forced to reconcile with the holy fact of its own mortality. The narrative shifts from the frenetic, urban pursuit of sensation to a profound, heavy stillness. We follow the characters as they reach the limits of their physical great work. The aging professional, the drifting youth, and the exhausted commodity all find themselves at a point where the flesh can no longer provide a hiding place from the self. The story describes a moment of total materiality, a scene where a character lies awake in the early hours of the morning, listening to the rhythmic, mechanical thumping of their own heart, realizing that this tiny, muscular pump is the only thing standing between them and the eternal void. This is the archetype of the mortal witness. The analysis of this moment reveals the ultimate psychological breakthrough. When you stop trying to use the body to escape your loneliness, you find that the body is the only thing that makes you real. The narrative depicts a final encounter, one that is not defined by lust or transaction, but by a quiet, desperate recognition of the other. We see two people who have spent the entire book treating each other as objects finally look into each other's eyes and see the shared decay. It is an intimacy of the gallows, a realization that they are both soldiers in a war they are destined to lose. The analysis here explores the concept of biological compassion, the empathy that arises not from moral superiority, but from the shared experience of being made of the same fragile, suffering matter. The lesson is that the flesh, in all its messiness and ugliness, is the ground upon which true love is built. It is not the perfect body that we love, but the dying one, because its very finitude makes it precious. The story illustrates that we only begin to value the person once we stop obsessing over the part. As the continuous narrative flows toward its end, the city of London undergoes a transformation. The grey concrete and cold glass are no longer seen as a prison, but as a liturgy of the ordinary. The characters begin to see the beauty in the entropy, the way the moss grows in the cracks of the pavement, the way the light softens the harsh edges of the buildings at dusk, the way an old man carries himself with a quiet dignity despite his failing knees. This is the integration of the shadow of decay. The analysis suggests that the modern world's obsession with forever young is a collective psychosis that prevents us from experiencing the sacredness of the cycle. By accepting the flesh as a temporary gift, the characters find a detached peace. They are no longer hungry ghosts because they have accepted that they will never be full. They are no longer declining masters because they have accepted that they never truly owned anything. The final scene of the script is one of profound surrender. A character is shown walking toward the river, not to end their life, but to witness its flow. They feel the weight of their own limbs, the warmth of their breath, and the coldness of the wind. They are flesh and they are aware. The narrative concludes that the meaning of life is not found in the transcendence of the body, but in the inhabitation of the moment. David Salay's flesh intended to convey that the ultimate tragedy is not that we are animals, but that we are animals who have forgotten how to be. The book forces a return to the primal integrity, the realization that your muscles, your blood, And your nerves are not a distraction from your higher self. They are yourself. You are the universe experiencing its own materiality through the limited, beautiful, and terrifying lens of the human anatomy. The core message is a radical call to embodied presence. In a world of digital abstractions and virtual escapes, the flesh is the only thing that cannot be faked. It is our anchor, our teacher, and our final resting place. To live a life true to the flesh is to live a life of honesty, accepting the pain and the pleasure as two sides of the same biological coin. The story ends with a heavy-hitting realization: the gold of the alchemist was never a metal, it was the consciousness that survives the realization that everything else is just dust. You are a miracle made of meat, a temporary explosion of awareness in a vast, silent cosmos. The flesh is a prison only if you try to escape it. It is a temple the moment you decide to stay.